Hello again, and welcome back to another episode of Minds on Guard, where we're learning how to deal with the mainstream media, all of the obstacles that are presented with that in the 21st century, how the mainstream media is manipulating and working to shift our behaviors, using their tactics to control our thoughts, our emotions, and ultimately our thinking capacities so that we lose sight of the more rational paths to take when dealing with the world. I signed off in the last video saying that I want to begin discussing more of the global level movements that have been happening in society, which have led to where we are today. All of the material that we have covered up to this point is in some way, shape, or form influenced by the large-scale shifts and movements that happen at the macro levels of society. We live in a highly interconnected world, and what happens in one country or even like a group of countries, say like the European Union or something like that, affects the rest of humanity, even all, from something happening in Europe affects what happens in South America or America or Africa. The rest of humanity, really, in various different ways. Sometimes this is felt in, like, say, commodities or like the physical goods arena of the world, where you have products and raw materials being shipped around the world, and prices fluctuate, and things get held up in ports, and it causes problems with supply chains and all kinds of things like that. While other times it's most intimately felt at the metaphysical space of society. Since this channel is called Minds on Guard, I think it's a good idea to begin focusing on the influence that happens in the collective consciousness or worldview issues that are being pushed at the levels which affect the most people. When things are done at the larger scales, like the global level, they inevitably will cover any area of life that touches the umbrella that exists, anything that exists under that sphere of influence. This means, potentially, that everything we do and know is affected by what happens at the top. So to start this next phase of our journey, I want to discuss the concept of think tanks. Those of you who've checked out or followed the Substack that I've shared called the Frontisterium by Brian Shane Roberts may have run across this essay discussing this topic. He has written very deeply and eloquently presenting some logic lines, that really tie this topic of think tanks to the way that reality works. And I feel that the essay contains some of the most crucial information on just what think tanks are and how they influence the rest of the world around us. The rest of this video will draw heavily from that resource, so let's take a look and see if we can understand a few things that are presented there. First of all, what is a think tank? According to Wikipedia, a think tank or policy institute is a research institute that performs research and advocacy concerning topics such as social policy, political strategy, economics, military, technology, and culture. Most think tanks are non-governmental organizations, but some are semi-autonomous agencies within government or are associated with particular political parties, businesses, or the military. Think tank funding often includes a combination of donations from wealthy individuals and personal contributions, with many also accepting government grants. Think tanks publish articles, studies, or even draft legislation on particular matters of policy or society. This information is then readily used by governments, businesses, media organizations, social movements, or other interest groups. Now, what is important to recognize with respect to think tanks and how they exist in today's world is held within the details of their funding and specific goals. They are concerned with research that is funded by individuals or entities whose main concern is influencing the largest group of people toward accepting and adopting the point of view that is being furthered by said research. It's pretty easy to understand that kind of concept in today's world. Thinking along like business perspectives, whoever fronts the cash gets to have the largest say on what goes on in the way the business runs. We see it all the time in the corporate world with respect to how businesses adopt certain operating policies, and even within like a corporate culture or, business statements, action plans, all the kinds of things that they present as their sort of MO, or the way that they operate within the business environment, given all kinds of factors as far as what products they sell, what space of the environment they operate in. But for this sort of topic, more and more over the last century, this kind of like corporate policy and financial influence that we see in the business world has gained further and further power and control over governments and international relationships through the efforts of various think tanks and the funding of such groups by like ultra wealthy individuals and the foundations through which they wield their power. Reading from the frontisterium with regard to think tanks, their design is to influence, often with the ultimate goal of gaining full spectrum dominance over their realm, including, as a precept of their design, rendering any opposing ideological body's ability to offer any serious resistance to their ideologies null. In short, think tanks are goal-oriented organizations designed to gain influence so that their doctrines will be brought forth and realized in the world. They are organizations of a single mind designed to influence the world writ large in precise ways. In upcoming videos, we will look at more of the specifics regarding the various foundations and individuals behind them, the funding organizations. But for now, it's going to be helpful to understand that these groups do exert power and influence over all that we experience simply due to the fact that they are so intertwined with public policy at the social and economic levels, as well as many other areas that fall under the scope and jurisdiction of governments around the world. If you've ever wondered how, say, like legislation gets either drafted and revised or put onto the like the Senate floor or the House floor, you have a think tank to thank for the process that takes place. Ideological wars are strategized over, and battle plans are drawn up in the midst of the most influential think tanks in the world, and we can actually track the development of society over the last century by examining who was funding which causes and what groups were meeting when to discuss the policies that would be most desirable for the world. Now, there's an issue with that, and the problem is that it's inherent within the idea of the idea of what's most desirable. There's this sort of utopian vision for humanity. What inevitably must happen for any proposed utopia to exist is that those who disagree with the purported perfect world must necessarily be removed or, in the most extreme cases, eliminated. This creates a very serious issue because no matter how altruistic the initial desires of those who hold the utopian vision, there's no way around the fact that their vision, in order for it to be made manifest, many people must fall under their control and influence and power. Otherwise, they'll suffer the consequences of pushing against the vision. This inevitably will always result in the destruction of freedom and even human life in the name of the greater good or progressing toward a brighter, more sustainable future. Anyone who stands in the way of these lofty aspirations must be taken out of the picture to the benefit of all. The main point of this particular video is to get us thinking about the idea of influence at the macro levels of society so that we can begin to see how that influence plays out in the more micro, localized levels. The systems of the world are intertwined and connected by vast wealth and power held by certain individuals and groups whose aim it is to exert their influence such that they're able to control the direction in which society moves. Ultimately, we must do what we can and make efforts to uncover what the deeper motives of these groups are. Regardless of what they may say their intentions are, the think tanks that are funded by these people or entities exist to serve a purpose. This, as any sound investor will know and understand, must be to benefit those who are funding the whole endeavor. The essay in the frontisterium makes a crucial note that think tanks seek to think for or represent a concept or ideal that, in many cases, is one that is held by ultra-wealthy individuals or groups that feel they have the better way forward for your future and their money, and the influence that it can buy allows them, through the think tank, to generate or conduct studies, lobby for legislation, fund groups or movements, etc. All manner of significant types of influence, including the influencing of science. What we will begin to see over the next series of videos is that there has been a concerted effort to do damage to our ability to think and reason well about the world that we're interacting with on a day-to-day basis. The influence that think tanks wield is just a single component in the wider structure of how we have arrived where we are today as a society. We will soon begin to dig into the players and the foundations that have come into power and uncover some of the ways in which our minds have been the major target of control and influence over the last century or so. So until next time, I hope you all stay safe. I hope everyone stays healthy, happy, and diligent and vigilant with your minds on God.